Welcome to Teaching Orchestra. In this episode, I'm going to be going over how I teach Spring Song by M.L. Daniels. We're still itching to get to the left-hand stuff. And you're banging your head on this desk because here's another bow video, and you're like, my viola still can't play an F sharp on the C string. Okay, we can't even play measure one yet. All right, I hear you. And we can really only teach one thing at a time. So if you really want to do the left hand first, that's the topic of my next video. You can go ahead and skip to that if you want. But if you have students that aren't as secure in their bowings, before you do the left hand, it'd be really a good idea to work out the bow distribution so that's easier to teach the left hand. In the Teaching Companion, which is available on teachingorchestra.com, I isolate the rhythms with open strings. In my last video, we went from little to big to approach tone, but in the Teaching Companion to approach rhythm, we go from big to little. We do the whole notes first, then the half notes, then the quarter notes. Make sure you do this on all four strings because your technique and weight are going to change slightly depending upon which string your students are playing. But it's not just about playing the rhythms themselves. And you can get your students really good at playing rhythm, and then when you go back to the music, they struggle because when we start to combine these rhythms here, they're asymmetrical and they run into problems because the half note's longer than the quarter note and they get in weird places of the bow. So that's why we need to talk about bow distribution. Where is the bow placed on the string? How much speed do we need to use? And really what are the challenges with Spring Song and the bow distribution. So anytime we have asymmetry in the bowings, it's going to be trickier. So let's take a look at the first two phrases. Both of them end on half notes for the upper strings. And both of these also happen to be up bows. So if you're bowing along, you have this up bow, you're going back towards the frog. Second phrase, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, another up bow, now you're crashing into your thumb, right? The students are going to need to adjust their bow speed to compensate. Otherwise, you're going to end up with bowing problems. They're going to be stuck in the lower half of the bow, and that's not good. So there's two options. You can speed up the preceding quarter note, or you can slow down the half note. Preceding quarter note's going to take a big down bow here, which will get you well into the upper half of the bow, so you have enough bow to play these half notes, okay? And in the other option, you just play it as written, but you use the same amount of bow on this half note that you did on the preceding quarter note. So this is going to be twice as slow. And this might change depending on which string you're in. Since we're on lower strings here, we might slow the bow down. And when it happens later on in the piece and it's on a higher string, you might have them use more speed on the quarter note. So this might change depending on where you are in the piece. But for me, I use the slower bows consistently because, my kids need all the help they can get, right? So we try to keep it consistent, and then we'll put a little bit of nuance later on. So in measure 8, we finally get a long down bow in the first violin part, but the seconds and violas have half notes here. So this is symmetrical, and this is 1, 2, 3, and then up on 4. If you want to have them start their quarter notes in the lower middle, that could be an option. You could also add a lift, like you could bow to lift 4, 1. So you've got a couple of options here. And here I prefer the lift because it's congruent with measure 12. We have 1, 2, 3, lift, and then we down bow for 13. It's your choice, and you can do what you want, whatever's best for your group. Now the tough one, measure 14. You've got a whole note on an up bow. What are we going to do here? It's down, up, down, up, down, up, uh-oh. And then we've got it again here. Down, up, down, up, down, up. So it's about twice as hard as it is at the beginning here with this stuff. We could start at the tip, but then we have another one at 16, so we're going to run out of bow eventually. We could play the whole note with a really slow bow. So that's an option. Option 2, we could do a double up bow on the quarter notes and then probably add a lift in 14. Or we could break the bow in 14, basically turning it into 2 half notes. So what do I do here? What's my preference? Well, it depends on my orchestra. If it's a second-year orchestra, I'll rewrite the parts into half notes. If I have a third-year group, I'll add the double up bows. And if I'm ever doing this with the Berlin Philharmonic, I'll leave it as written and try to have them slow it down and play it, because the Berlin Philharmonic will do a really nice job with that bowing. In 26 and 27, it's the same bowing here, so you probably want to do the same thing that you did back here. The bowings in the lower strings are a lot tamer, but there is a spot in measure 30 that has a half note tied to a quarter note. I don't think this is nearly as much of a problem as it is for the middle and upper strings in earlier in the piece, because they have enough time to recover as they bow through this. But I just want to point it out because there is some asymmetry here. And I also want to point out that if you want this part to come out, I would really suggest that your students play closer to the bridge in a lower bowing lane. And I'm going to talk about bowing lane in my common problems video, but bowing lane 2 works really well here, so you might want to mark that in your score. The ending has a little bit of asymmetry. The inner parts and cellos are going to be fine as long as they have a quick up bow on beat 4 and 56. Up, down, up, down, up, down. That's going to put them in the lower half of the bow for the last note. And if you're wondering why the violas don't have a slur on the last note, it's probably because it's a 4/3 suspension, and the composer wants to bring that out, making sure that it really stands out here. For the first violins and basses, they're going to need to use more bow speed on the second half note to get to the tip, because they need more bow for the whole note. So right here in 55, up bow, big down bow so that we've got enough bow to work with here. Same thing in basses, up bow, big down bow to the tip, so we have enough bow to work with. There's also ritardando, which might make this a little more difficult. I think pretty much for everybody in the last note, I would recommend a staggered bowing. So, you could break this tie. The violas are doing it anyway, so why can't everybody else? It's only fair, right? In my next video, I'm going to go over the left hand and give you some strategies on how to teach the chromaticism, and I hope to see you then.